Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the life, death, and personality of Rodney Dangerfield? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So first I'll go through the background of Rodney Dangerfield, and then I'll move to my analysis. Rodney Dangerfield's real name was Jacob Cohen, although he legally changed it to Jack Roy later on. I will simply refer to him as Dangerfield. Rodney Dangerfield was born in Village of Babylon, New York on November 22, 1921. He rarely saw his father. His father was a vaudevillian performer and traveled a lot. His mother was extremely distant and callous toward him, never displaying any sign of affection throughout his childhood. On birthdays, he would never get a present or a card. Really, his mother had little contact with him in terms of any type of emotion or feeling. Rodney Dangerfield had one sister. Eventually, Dangerfield's father ceased all contact with the family. At this point, his mother moved Dangerfield and his sister to Queens. Dangerfield was only 15 when he started writing material for stand-up comedians. He would graduate from high school in 1939 and found a variety of jobs, including selling newspapers and delivering groceries. At age 19, he legally changed his name to Jack Roy. He started performing as a singing waiter and tried to do some stand-up. He had difficulty gaining any traction. He went on to sell aluminum siding to supplement his work as an entertainer. Dangerfield would first try cannabis in 1942. This would start a lifelong pattern of usage. He smoked cannabis just about every day for 60 years. He completely gave up working as an entertainer in 1949 and focused mostly on selling aluminum siding and working as a truck driver. Dangerfield married in 1951. He divorced in 1961, but I guess one could say it was a failed divorce because he married that same woman again in 1963. The couple gave divorce another shot in 1970. This time they were successful. During the time that couple was together, those two marriages, they had a son and a daughter. In the 1960s, Dangerfield tried to get back into show business. He resumed his career as a performer. He started performing at hotels in the Catskill Mountains. He had trouble getting booked and eventually was carrying $20,000 in debt. This is when he came up with the idea of creating a distinct comedic persona, a character that has bad luck and has trouble getting any respect. Instead of using the name Jack Roy, he started using the name Rodney Dangerfield. His big break would come in March of 1967 when he appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show as a replacement for another act. Dangerfield would go on to make many more appearances on that show, as well as regularly appearing on The Tonight Show and The Dean Martin Show. In 1969, Dangerfield and a friend of his built a comedy club in New York City named Dangerfield's. Several HBO comedy specials were recorded there. Dangerfield was instrumental in launching or boosting the careers of several comedians, including Jim Carrey and Sam Kinison. Dangerfield was in a number of movies, including Caddyshack, Easy Money, Back to School, and Natural Born Killers. In 1993, Dangerfield married again. He would remain married for the rest of his life. On November 22, 2001, Dangerfield had a heart attack while performing stand-up on The Tonight Show. This happened to be his 80th birthday. Dangerfield recovered and returned to the show on his 81st birthday. He would have heart surgery on August 24, 2004. Rodney Dangerfield would die on October 5, 2004. He was 82 years old. Now moving to my analysis. The person of Jack Roy did not like being confused with the persona of Rodney Dangerfield. He viewed himself as completely different than his character. I find this interesting because he really seemed to go out of his way to always be in character. For example, watching him on The Tonight Show, again, he appeared there many times. Even during the time when he was being interviewed, like not performing his act on the stage, he would still be Rodney Dangerfield. There weren't many moments where it was Jack Roy talking. I feel as though he had many opportunities to separate the person from the persona that he created, but he did not take advantage of those opportunities. It seemed as though his person and his persona were inextricably linked. He suggested that he went into show business in order to get attention and love, essentially as a way to compensate for what his mother did not give him. He needed to be an entertainer to survive. He also said he always identified as a loser. I guess in a sense, Jack Roy really became Rodney Dangerfield, perhaps out of necessity. Dangerfield was chronically depressed from a young age. It's not known exactly when it started, but at age 15, he was already severely depressed. He didn't tell anybody about his depression until the 1990s. Before deciding to write his autobiography, he wanted to compile a book of 1,000 letters from people with depression. It was supposed to be a reminder to those with depression that they were not alone. No publishers were interested in Dangerfield's book idea about depression, so he came up with the idea to write a book about himself, emphasizing his low mood and the role of cannabis in his life. As I mentioned before, he smoked cannabis almost every day for 60 years. It was a major part of his life. He talked about it frequently. He even smoked when he was in the hospital, which landed him in a bit of trouble. Dangerfield sought mental health counseling for quite some time. He found it to be effective in treating his depression. Yet, he still continued to use cannabis. I get the sense that his cannabis use was really more about trying to bring his level of anxiety down. Depression is often accompanied by anxiety. So even if the mental health counseling was helping him with depressive feelings, it may not have been helping as much with anxiety, or he thought it wasn't. He believed he needed something else to help, again, bring that anxiety level down. Some people said that Dangerfield was a great advocate for people with depression. I can see this perspective, and I do think he raised awareness about depression, and he promoted the idea of people receiving mental health counseling. But a major part of his story seemed to be about cannabis. It seemed like cannabis always took the center stage when the topic of depression came up. I don't think that's necessarily an ideal message to promote, considering the known dangerous characteristics of cannabis. Cannabis can cause dependency. I've seen this many times. The research literature is quite clear about this risk. It can also increase cancer risk and cause a number of other problems. Even still, the use of cannabis is becoming normalized. So I guess in a way, Rodney Dangerfield was ahead of his time. I get the sense that Rodney Dangerfield was on his way to understanding his depression and anxiety, on his way to figuring out how to manage his mood, but the cannabis was perhaps one of the few remaining obstacles, if not the very last obstacle in his way, a temporary solution that became a permanent behavior. I think he was doing just about the best that he could, but he was not willing to or able to acknowledge that the cannabis use could have been problematic. When considering everything about Dangerfield's depression, like looking at the overall picture, he did cope with it pretty well. His childhood was extremely lonely. He was not really shown any love, affection, or compassion. It's actually pretty amazing that he was able to do as well as he did. He battled not only his depression, but again, quite a bit of anxiety, and became an incredibly successful comedian. The next item I will review is his potential personality profile. I'm going to offer my thoughts regarding Rodney Dangerfield, the person, so Jack Roy, as opposed to the persona, although again, they seem to be intertwined. Dangerfield was high in openness to experience. He was creative, intellectually curious, and was able to think abstractly. He was high in conscientiousness, a hard worker not only as a comedian, but in his jobs prior to comedy. When he sold aluminum siding, he was extremely successful for a time. Dangerfield was extroverted. He was friendly, outgoing, sensation-seeking, talkative, and assertive. For the most part, Dangerfield was agreeable. He was straightforward, modest, and valued cooperation. He was altruistic in many ways as well, including offering help to up-and-coming comedians. As far as neuroticism, his level was higher than average. He was depressed, anxious, and had trouble resisting temptation, but he was not angry or particularly insecure. Moving to the last question, what was Rodney Dangerfield like as a comedian? Comedy is an art, so any assessment is a matter of opinion. I think that Rodney Dangerfield was probably one of the greatest comedians of all time. Johnny Carson and Jay Leno would both say that Rodney Dangerfield was the greatest comedian who ever lived. His act consisted of self-deprecating one-liners that were crafted to perfection, not only the words, but his delivery. Dangerfield had a phenomenal quantity of content and made many appearances. He was active in television, including late-night television, movies, comedy clubs. He was everywhere. Rodney Dangerfield was one of those comedians who really had a respect for the profession, a great work ethic, and a true desire to make people laugh. He was always working. When people would meet him, they just couldn't believe how hard he worked. He wrote all the time. He kept a pen and paper in his pocket so that if an idea came up, he could just write it down on the spot. He would keep refining his jokes, changing words, changing his delivery. He would run off to comedy clubs at night to try out a new joke and figure out where to position that joke within his routine. In the late 90s, when the drug Viagra came out, he monitored its popularity online to make sure that enough people were familiar with it so they would understand any jokes that he was going to write. When he wrote his first Viagra joke, he booked himself on The Tonight Show so he could deliver it before somebody had a chance to steal it from him. As far as finances, Rodney Dangerfield could have quit or slowed down earlier in his career, but he kept working. He didn't do it for the money. He worked because he loved being a comedian. His only regret was that he didn't become successful sooner. He wanted to have a longer career, more time making people laugh. Every now and then, a comedian comes along who elevates the art of comedy. In the case of Rodney Dangerfield, he brought the art up by putting himself down. Through the process of repeatedly telling people about how he didn't get respect, Rodney Dangerfield won the respect of a vast audience. Those are my thoughts on the comedian, Rodney Dangerfield. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.